But Ajai, so I think I had mentioned how like me and Getty had met a number of times over the years at various shows and stuff, and at least on two or three occasions we had like had discussions like, yo, we should work together, and it just hadn't manifested itself. So he hit me up right around the beginning of the pandemic asking, and I, at the time we had just finished up Purple Moonlight Pages. I was not really looking to do a new album. And also the pandemic was just starting, like I was in everyone was in a weird spot right at that moment. Uh and he hit me up asking me for a beat for a song he was working on. It's a song that had already come out. It's the song Jim Duggan. Have you ever heard that one?
Yeah. Hmm.
So he had already put it out, I think, in two different ways at that point, like with different
He
beats. And
always does that. Like
right,
we
he's
a
like,
bunch
yo,
of
I want to
yeah.
put out the real definitive version of it. I don't think any of the other ones are like the right version. Will you send me some beats for it? And I was a little bit like, yo, why don't we do a new song? But sure. So I sent him like four or five beats, and he pretty quickly wrote back. He's like, nah, none of these are the right thing. Like, send me some faster beats. So I sent him like three faster beats, I think. And then he wrote back again. He's like, nah, I don't know. Maybe just try one more time. I sent him like another beat, I think. I think at that point I was getting annoyed. I probably sent him like one more beat, but I sent him a total of like 8 or 9 beats, I think. Then I just didn't hear from him for a couple weeks. And then out of the blue, he sends me like this, I think like 15 or it might have been 18-minute long MP3 that was the first half of the Ajay album. It was like freestyled. It wasn't like in song format yet. And it basically sounded like he took all 9 of my beats, he put them on an iPod, and was just randomly switching tracks. So like sometime, I think through the 15 minutes, he played each beat like 3 or 4 times. That's how quickly he was switching beats. And he just kind of freestyled a lot. And I've gone back and listened to that original MP3, and it had like big chunks of some of the songs that ended up being the first half of Ajay. But
That's so crazy
he
to
sent that
me.
to me, and I was just like, "What the hell is this? Like,
Because
I've
he's
never
just
heard
yeah.
anything like this."
That's like a novel, and also the amount of knowledge you have to know about streetwear is
Right, and I'm not super into streetwear, so I didn't even know like half of the things he was talking about, like things that ended up being brands and like real things I thought were just like made up words sometimes he's talking about. Uh, but yeah, I was like, yo, what the hell is this? So I wrote back, I was like, what is this, dude? Like, he's like, I don't know. Like, this is just an idea I had like bouncing around in my head. Like, I was like, dude, this is kind of amazing, but it's like a huge mess. Like, but let's figure out how we can do something with this. So then we started like kind of chopping it up into individual ideas or groups of ideas. And I started
what were the
choosing like,
first song? What beats? The first four beats, like were they?
I mean, the all most of the beats on the first half of Ajay were in that group of beats. Well,
Wow.
not all of them. Like some of the ones that I added afterwards would be like Collab, I think was made afterwards, and then what else? The one where she's talking about where he's talking to his therapist and he buys her a couch. That beat I think I made after the fact.
Yeah.
But some of the original ones were like "Don't Wear That Suit, Ajay." He had that beat. He had the beat for the opening number, like
Ajay,
the
yeah.
very first song, the softball game. In fact, that whole softball, pretty much the whole softball song was in that original MP3. Parts of the things where he's fighting the fire, where he's going to fight the firefighter or whatever, where
Yeah.
the firefighter fights for him against the neighbor or whatever.
Oh, against
That
the
was
like kung fu master
yeah,
or something.
exactly. Part
Yeah.
of some of those beats were in there. The final song's beat was in there. I think the Paris beat I made after the fact. But yeah, like about like 2/3 of the beats on the first side of Ajay were those beats that I sent for Jim Duggan, I think.
And then how did it become then a Kenny Dennis album in the second half?
That was all
But you
Getty.
just kept you those
I
were
mean,
different. You were just sending him more beats
right. So
after
at
that
that
to make
point,
them.
like we started like kind of parsing it into like chunks that made sense for the Ajay half, and then somewhere along that process, he's like, there's a second half of this story. Do you know about Kenny Dennis? And I was like, well, I sort of know about Kenny Dennis. And he's like, well, check this out. Send me like 10 more beats. And I was like, all right. And the funny thing is a lot of those beats on Ajay are all like old beats, like only like maybe like 4 or 5 beats on that album, if even that many are like beats made for that album. And the
I have
whole
to
reason
ask,
was this
was Elaine?
process.
How about that's my like third most listened to song I think this year.
Oh, Elaine. Oh no,
Yeah,
that one was an old beat. That was like a quite an old beat actually. That was probably from like 2015 or
that's so
2016.
wild.
It was from like when Team Supreme was happening, because that was when I was most interested in experimenting with like kind of trying to come up with like trap beats that aren't trap beats. Like I went
Hmm.
through a phase where that was like what I was trying to do, and like Elaine was from that era of like trap-esque beats, but
Yeah,
like
I love that track.
thanks. But yeah, like that whole album was very weird. Like I've kind of described it in the past, like it's almost like Getty kind of tricked me into doing that album, because if he had just come to me at that time, like right in March of 2020, and said, "Hey, send me 25 beats, let's make an album together about streetwear," I would have been like, "That sounds fun, but like maybe next year. I'm like kind of busy right now, or I'm like just doing other stuff like right this moment."
But in the
Uh,
end, fate actually created that one too.
Right. So yeah, and then once we got into it, and then I realized like, because I was a huge fan of like Cool Keith and MF Doom like earlier on before I was. I mean, I was making beats back then, but when I was very much an amateur at the time, uh, and I started realizing like this is my chance to be a part of that type of vibe. Like not that like at that time. I mean, look, Cool Keith still is around and stuff, but I feel like this was my chance to be part of like a storytelling, wacky, crazy comic book esque, like kind of hip, like because that's like a whole like lane I think in hip hop, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's like to me that's a very fun thing to be a part of. So yeah,